Hello, Mad Cappers. Today we're going to learn how to make the Ivy cap, the Irish cap, the driving cap, the Paddy cap, the Gatsby cap, the Snap cap, the Baker Boy cap, but for this guy it's the birthday boy cap. Adrian just loves these hats. He's been wearing them ever since I've known him, and I've made him batches over the course of our time together, and so for his birthday this week I made him a few more. And I love this hat because you can make it in all different fabrics. The pattern is fairly straightforward. The thing that's only challenging is that when I used to make them, I would use a piece of plastic in the visor, but I'm going to show you today there's brand new materials on the marketplace that make this cap a snap. We have a full sewing pattern available for this hat in 4 head sizes, including extra large. And you can use all sorts of fabrics, including this old shirt that was headed for the bin. But it's a good quality cotton. I put some medium weight fusible stabilizer on the back side, and it made a lovely cap, and he's pretty happy with it. A full pattern in 4 head sizes with a full color instruction booklet is available for a nominal charge in the links below in the description, or you can get the free one in size large from our website. Just make sure your printer's set to actual size, which works for letter or A4 printers. So we're going to look at 3 different ways to close the front of your cap. So closing it means bringing the front, the top down to the top of the visor, sandwiching the band in between. And you can use something simple like a safety pin, because we've added this secret sauce inside on our band towards the top of the band that helps to flatten out the front of the hat. So we just want to center our pin across the seams that we've added, which makes it really easy to tell where the center of the front is. And we'll just pin through the inside and just catch 1 layer of the visor. And a safety pin is probably something that most of us have on hand. So there you get the perfect result of the look of the cap, and no one ever needs to know that there's a safety pin holding that front closed in that distinctive cap, Ivy cap look, flat cap look. The other way is to sew across the front, and maybe in a 2-inch or 5 centimeter long seam, centering that band seam in the middle. Or you can add a snap. And that's why this is sometimes called a snap cap, because of the distinctive snap that holds down the front of the cap onto the top of the visor. And I'm going to show you how I use the snapping tool, a very simple snapping tool. It's quite inexpensive. This tool is used sometimes for purses or for baby diapers, and it's about $25 Canadian, so I find that really reasonable. There's a link below. It comes with about 400 snaps in different colors, and it works great for this hat. We used to use this hard plastic for our Ivy cap visors, but now out with the old and in with the new. There's all sorts of new ways to do this. This craft foam is 2 millimeters thick. That would work well. You can sew through that easily and it will still give you a nice shape. And it doesn't really matter what color you use because it's going to be inside your fabric layers. You can sew lots of layers of stabilizer together to make a heavier stabilizer for your visor. Or you can use this brand new fiber that I just love. It's called Peltex. And a lot of people who are making sort of a shaped handbag are using this as their stabilizer, and it works great for this cap. And there'll be a link below for that too. So I'm going to cut the visor template comes in 2 pieces. The stabilizer is a little bit smaller than the fabric that it's going to go into, and we're going to sew all those layers together. And for this cap, no matter what fabric you use, I'm using a medium weight, 1 side fusible interfacing, and this gray plaid that I'm using is a knit with a brushed finish. So I'm going to use a piece of cotton over top when I iron on that fusible interfacing. And I've outlined my outer visor pattern template. And I've got my right sides together for my outer visor. And I'm just going to pin them and then I'm going to cut them. So the two pieces are going to be cut exactly the same, and the pins help me achieve that. And you see my stabilizer is cut a little bit smaller than my outer shape. And I've also got that small piece of secret stabilizer ready to go as well. My top of my hat looks like the back of an elephant, according to Adrian. It has a distinctive shape, and so does the band that goes around your head. That wide bump is the back, and the seam is going to be at the front of the cap. And I'm also cutting a piece of my lining cotton or quilting weight cotton for a sweatband, and I'm going to cut it on the bias so there's some give as I'm sewing it in. It's actually 3.5 inches or 9 centimeters deep and an inch longer than my head size circumference or the size of the hat that I'm making. And I'm just going to do my rough sewing now, sewing up all those seams that don't need top stitching yet, but will need top stitching because I'm going to do that to make nice flat seams. I will be using a 3/8 of an inch or 1 centimeter wide seam for most of my sewing. So what I'm working on first is my band piece for my lining, and I'm sewing that front seam. The band piece is in 2 pieces and it comes up and it's in between the visor and the top of the cap, but you don't really see it at the front. It's sort of in between. It's sandwiched in between the top and the visor, and that is the back seam for the top of the cap. And now I'll repeat for the outside layers of my cap. And now I'm sewing right sides together. Both sides of this outer layer of my visor have the fusible, one side fusible medium weight interfacing, and I'm just going to place that heavier piece of stabilizer, the Peltex, and it's a sew-on stabilizer, and I'm just going to do my regular seam width of 3/8 of an inch, and I'm just catching the edge of that piece all the way around. And you can clip those curves if you like. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to my serger and I'm just going to compress that seam and tidy it up with the serge all the way from one side of the visor to the other. And I'm leaving the center curve open for now, but I'm rolling out that edge and I'll pin it as I roll it so that it's got the same amount of fabric on the top as on the bottom. And I'm putting that seam right in the middle of the outside edge. And I'm just going to do a top stitch using my regular seam width, and I'll go around the outside edge with that top stitch. And now it's time to top stitch that front seam of our band piece. This is the piece that goes in between the top and the top of the visor. And I'm just going to sew that seam flat before I add that secret sauce. And the secret sauce is this little template that is in your pattern package that just flattens out that piece so it's easy to sandwich it with the top of the visor for our snap cap and gives our snap something to go through, and it pulls that front of the cap down. I like to think that it helps to flatten out the top of the front of the cap to give you that nice smooth line across the front. And so this is about 1.5 centimeters from the top, or 5/8 of an inch down from the top is where the top of this curve is going to be. And I want to have it down far enough so that when I sew this band to the top of the hat with my 3/8 of an inch seam width or 1 centimeter seam width, I'm going to clear this. I don't want to catch that in that joining seam, but I want it to be fairly close to the edge. So I want the top curve to be as close to the top edge of this band piece as possible without being in the seam. Here's the other side, and now I'm going to just finish up with some top stitching on that back pleat, the back seam on the back of the top of my cap, on the outer layer, up one side and back down the other. This is a faux double needle look, and I really like to do this type of double top stitching on a lot of my hat seams. Gives a nice smooth finished look on the outside. Now on this inside layer, however, I'm just doing a top stitch off to one side. So the raw edges are all off to one side on the lining. And now that we've done the top stitching on both the lining and the outside pieces, it's time to start assembling the band to the top of the hat. So the center front of the top of our lining piece and our outer layer has a notch, and we're going to match the seam on the band with the notch at the center front, and then we'll ease in all those curves all the way around. And I'm using my regular seam width of 3/8 of an inch or 1 centimeter. And this is what it will look like when you're finished. You can see the cap taking shape, and I'm just going to top stitch the raw edge of the seam underneath down towards the bottom edge of the cap all the way around. So now the top and the band have a top stitching, and you can see there, and there's a better way to see. Black thread on black fabric's hard to see. And I'm going to do something, because this fabric is stretchy, I'm just going to do an edge stitch all the way around my two pieces for the outside layer, just to stop them from stretching as I'm sewing. And that piece on the top has a center notch as well. And we're just going to join up the corners, work around that curve. We've eased in the piece all the way around, and we've pinned the pieces together, right sides together. And there you have a cap that's really starting to take shape. Now for this outside layer, I'm going to do my top stitching on both sides of the seam, opening up that seam flat underneath. And we're going to give the outside layer of our cap the double top stitch treatment. Nice professional look, double needle sort of look finish. Take your time, you're going to go around all sorts of curves, but it really smooths out those curves. And that's how it should look on the inside. Seam edges sewn flat. Now at this point, it's time to put in our snap, if you're going to do that. If not, just continue ahead to the next stages of assembly. But I'm pushing through my owl, and I'm placing a hole, and I'm going through the middle of the seam on the band, missing my stitching, and into the interfacing underneath the stabilizer, and making a hole that I can see so I can poke my sharp end of my snap through. Now your snap will have a male and a female side, so it doesn't really matter which one you use on the visor or in this section at the top of the hat or in the band of the hat. But you want to set it as close as you can to that seam joining the top and the band together, that you can get your tool inside to do the job right. Now I'll have to check, but I think my snap is a 3/8 of an inch in diameter or 1 centimeter snap. I'll put it in the description below, but you can see the edge is sort of lined up with the edge of my sewing. And I'm using my chalk pencil now just to draw a line down the top of my visor. And this helps me center that snap in line with the center of the band snap that's just above it. And I'm going to punch a hole through the fabric and through my stabilizer layer. It's about 2 centimeters from that finished sewn edge, or 3/4 of an inch. But it's really as close as I can get to the edge with my tool that I'm using to set the snap. And so I'll use the other half of my snap assembly, and I will slowly position the tool so I've got the bottom and the top pieces inside the snapping tool mechanism, and I will use the pressure to set the snap. And now it's time to sew that open curve closed, that inside curve of my visor. And I'm using about a 1/4 of an inch wide seam close to the edge, or 6 millimeter seam width close to the edge. And I put my lining inside the top of my cap, matching my seams and my notches, and I'm sewing them wrong sides together all the way around. And I'm just going to clip into that curve, that inside curve of the visor to help with the stress of easing it in, and I'll add some clips to the front of my cap as well, where the visor is going to be sewn next. And I'm just using shallow clips to help ease in that visor. The visor is a fairly firm visor because of the stabilizer that we use, so it is a little bit more challenging to ease it in. And the clipping helps me sort of straighten out those curves in the visor as I'm sewing it to the top, which helps reduce the chance that I'm going to get puckers of fabric in my seam that I don't want. And I'll start from the center and work to one side. And I'll try to do about my average seam width. It doesn't really matter because we're going to go around this again when we add our sweatband or our bias band. So you just want to sew the two pieces together at this point. And once you finish that first half side, you're just going to flip it over and work from the other side of the visor, from the center point, over to the other edge. And we're just going to use a fairly shallow seam to do that. We're just checking now to make sure our snaps fit, and they do. I'm going to sew the back seam of my sweatband or bias band together, finger press. I'll top stitch on either side so the seam is flat, and then I'm going to fold it in half with bringing up the two raw edges together, wrong sides together. And I will take it over to my pressing mat, and I'm going to give it a good pressing. And cutting it on the bias means we're going to have some flexibility easing it in as we wrap it around the outside layer of our cap and attach it to the cap. So I've unsnapped my visor, and I'm matching up my back seams, and I did cut a little notch in the center front of my sweatband, my bias band. And I'm going to match that center notch with the center notches at the front of the hat. And I'm going to use my regular seam width to sew that onto the hat. And I'm working from inside the hat, so my sweatband or bias band is underneath. And if I need to, I can pull on it slightly to ease it into fit. And I'll just work slowly all the way around the hat, just making sure that all those seam edges are lined up. And this is another instance where my handy magnetic seam guide gives me something to rest against, so I can make sure that those two layers are perfectly matched at the side, on the right side, when the needle comes across them. So just be careful and take your time. There's no rush. Not when you're going to make such an awesome hat. And you see, I'm trying to pull those layers straight as I pass by on the left side. And of course, my magnetic seam guide helps give me something on the right side to work up against. And I just want to flatten all those layers as I go over them with my needle and my presser foot. And it's a little bit of a challenge when you get to an end of the visor, an edge of the visor. You want to make sure that you can line it up straight. But take your time, it's so worth it in the end, because this is an awesome hat. All right, now we are ready to do that last finishing stitch, which is going to close up that bottom edge and give us a nice finish. So we're just rolling that sweatband inside, and we're putting some of the outside fabric on the inside, just a very small amount so that we don't see that sweatband when we're wearing the cap. And I'm just rolling it to a point where it naturally wants to stay. And I'll pin it as I go around, but I'll pin it in a way that I can keep my pins in as I'm sewing, that they're out of the way. And I'm going to sew across that top of the cap and give it a top stitch all the way around, and that's going to hold that sweatband or our bias band in place on the inside of the hat. So I'll start on one side of the visor and go around the entire hat. I'm sewing about the width of my presser foot as I go across the visor, but I will make this top stitch a little bit wider from the edge once I clear my visor. And at this point, I like to stop and get my magnetic seam guide back to work. And I'll use that to do a consistent width all the way around the side and back of the cap. And here we are. Look at that. We are finished. The only thing left to do is to take out the pins and just go over to the cutting table and take a good look. Make sure we've cut all our threads. That beautiful musical lining is so lovely. You can use lots of your favorite quilting fabric scraps for your lining. You can recycle an old shirt or an old pair of jeans for your outer layer. What's not to love about this hat? Hey, if you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. We are very quick to answer any of your questions. Anything that you need to know about technique, I'm here for you. Your success is my success. So let's see if our male model likes his hats. There he is. Mr. Adrian says, yep, I like my new hats. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked the video, give us a thumbs up. Give Adrian a thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed yet, consider subscribing to our channel. We've got 36 years worth of patterns and original designs and headwear and purses and all sorts of things to share with you, and we're just getting started. Thank you so much for watching. And don't forget the links for the things that we use to make this hat are in the description below, as well as the pattern that you can purchase or the one that's for free. We really enjoyed this lesson and I hope you did too. We'll see you soon with another one. Bye for now.